Welcome to Bunny Trails, a whimsical adventure of idioms and other turns of phrase. I'm Shauna Harrison.
And I'm Dan Pugh. Each week, we take an idiom, or other turn of phrase, and try to tell its story from the entry into the English language to how it's used today. Have you ever been in a situation where you worked really hard to do something and then succeeded? Maybe you studied to pass an exam, or you spent many long nights finishing a big project. Or after many years of grinding away, you get that big promotion at work. And then you think, I've done it, I've achieved success. So now I don't need to try so hard anymore. You're proud of what you've already achieved, and at first that success feels great. But over time, you fall behind while others keep growing and keep moving forward. And you realize you've grown complacent and that you are resting on your laurels. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, to rest on your laurels means, quote, to be satisfied with past success and to do nothing to achieve further success, end quote.
There's so many things about that.
Right. So when we hear this phrase, it is mostly used in the negative, as in someone who did great things before, but is now just coasting through life on fame or success of that previous thing. And I recognize that there is a danger in resting on one's laurels, but to understand how we've got here, we have to recognize the original versions of the phrase were a positive thing. It was good to have earned your laurels and then to be able to relax now.
Right.
So I think that's an important step. But before we can talk even about how the phrase was positive, I think we've got to talk about why laurels and what a laurel is.
Yeah, I think so.
And so to even talk about laurels, we're going to have to go back a little bit further. We've got to talk about the Greek god Apollo.
I love this so much because I know what a laurel is. I don't think that most people, like, you say things like this and people are like, I don't even know what word you're using.
I don't even know what word you're saying. Laurels, right? It's a tree. It's a leaf. We'll get there. You'll know about it. By the end of this episode, you are going to know all you need to know about laurels. But first, Apollo. So here's a quick note on the god of light and the sun, music, poetry, and the arts. And this comes from GreekHistoryHub.com. Quote, Apollo's origins can be traced back to the early Hellenic period, around the 8th century BCE, when ancient Greeks began to formalize their religious practices and beliefs. His worship likely developed from a fusion of various local cults and traditions, reflecting the complex tapestry of Greek mythology. Some scholars suggest that Apollo may have originally been a solar deity, symbolizing the life-giving power of the sun, which aligns with his later associations with light and healing, end quote. So there's a whole mythological mess that happens with Apollo, where he slays the Python at Delphi. Apollo, full of arrogance with his epic kill, begins mocking the famous archer Eros, also known as Cupid. We'll turn to thecollector.com for Eros/Cupid's reaction. Quote, the next thing Cupid did was something Apollo did not see coming. The god of love stroked his wings and flew right next to the god of music. Then he shot him in the chest with a golden arrow with a sharp, glistening point. This arrow did not kill or hurt Apollo. The true injury was not corporeal, it was sentimental. But Apollo would learn that soon. With a second arrow, a blunt one with a lead beneath its shaft, Cupid shot Daphne, a nymph who also happened to be a virgin huntress of the goddess Artemis. Daphne was very beautiful, and many men came to ask her hand. However, she was devoted to hunting and followed the laws of the goddess Artemis, who demanded chastity and virginity. Cupid's arrows both had special abilities. The one that hit Apollo was an arrow of love and intense passion. The moment he got hit by the arrow, Apollo spotted Daphne hunting in the wild and, unable to contain his passion, went after her. However, the arrow that hit Daphne was an arrow that filled the nymph's heart with disgust for the god who appeared in front of her. So Cupid's revenge was cruel. Apollo was madly in love with a woman who hated him with every ounce of her being, end quote.
See, this is when people are like, oh, did you get hit by, like, struck by Cupid's arrow? And I'm always like, I don't think
That's not
that
necessarily a
means much.
great thing. Which of Cupid's arrows? Was
Like,
it the
which
good one
one?
that makes me love whatever, or was it the one that makes me hate
And
everything?
frankly, both of them sound bad.
Yeah,
Like,
that's fair.
honestly, like an application.
Well, to bring this back to our story here, Daphne tried to run, but Apollo was persistent, and eventually she begged her father for rescue from Apollo, and her father turned her into a tree, specifically the Laurus nobilis, or laurel tree. And so Apollo and thus his worshippers have revered the laurel tree ever since. So the laurel is a type of tree, and you have likely interacted with the leaves before, and we'll talk about that as we go forward. But you also sometimes see them like in the UN symbol, like the little wreaths that people wore in Greek mythology. All of those are laurel leaves. And this gives us the backstory that we need to understand the Pythian Games. So the Pythian Games were held every 4 years, and they recognized competitors throughout Greece for their athletic prowess. The games, named after Apollo's defeat of the Python at Delphi, were one of the 4 Panhellenic Games of ancient Greece. The others were the Nemean Games, the Isthmian Games, and the Olympic Games. I'm sure most of you have heard of the Olympic Games. So the Pythian Games were in honor of Apollo, which explains why the winner was awarded a laurel wreath. This signified their great accomplishment while showing reverence to Apollo. So here's where we start to see laurels and having, laurels given to you or gifted to you being associated with great accomplishment. And the connection of the laurel as an honor was further solidified by the Romans' extensive borrowing of Greek culture. Here's a note from Tom Curley, writing for History Hogs in 2024. Quote, in addition to symbolizing victory, the laurel wreath was also used to decorate funerals in Roman times. The wreath was often placed on the head of the deceased as a way of honoring their accomplishments in life. Using the wreath in this context helped emphasize its significance as a symbol of achievement and success even beyond athletics, end quote. So now we have the Romans who are adding to this by using it as a honor of a life well lived and of the accomplishments that happened in a life well lived. And then it brings us to the time period often known as the Renaissance, where many classical traditions were reignited as the arts took on a more popular role in European society. During this time frame, the laurels once again were on display through paintings, sculptures, and other works of the ancient pantheons. By the early 1600s, the idea of a great artist, specifically pertaining to poems and stories, became known as a laureate. And official and unofficial roles were created in governments for a poet laureate. We'll look more at the history of poet laureates of the world in our behind the scenes video, which airs every Friday on our Patreon, which is patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. So this further solidifies in the 1600s the usage of laurels through laureates as being representative of a person who has accomplished a great many things in their life. Many of the early examples of resting on your laurels included relaxing or reposing in the shadow of your laurel, the figurative laurel tree that represented the great works that you have been publicly recognized for, and that was a good thing. So we'll look at the words themselves now. This is an early example of laurels being used in this figurative but positive way, and this is from the 1680 work, The Orphan, or The Unhappy Marriage, a Tragedy, as it is acted at His Royal Highness's the Duke's Theatre. It was written by Thomas Otway. Quote, nevertheless, I thought myself not quite unhappy, so long as I had hopes this way yet to recompense my disappointment past. When I considered also that poetry might claim right to a little share in your favor, for Tassa and Aristo, some of the best, have made their names eternal by transmitting to after ages the glory of your ancestors, and under the spreading of that shade, where 2 of the best have planted their laurels, how honored should I be, who am the worst, if but a branch might grow for me. End quote. So this is an example of using laurel, meaning someone who has given their service and has earned the right to relax or rest on their laurels.
Yeah.
So that is how we get from all of these things here, the concept of a laurel tree to laurel wreaths to, from athletic prowess and Apollo's followers to, the Romans' practices, and then the Renaissance for the Europeans, and in which English, became a common language for a lot of the European. A lot of the European nations, as the United Kingdom made its spread during the late 1600s, early 1700s, and beyond. So we definitely, you can see how this spread and became a big thing. And in fact, the UK was one of the first to recognize a poet laureate in the early 1600s, and then eventually making an official position for a poet laureate in the UK. So, then everything spreads as the United Kingdom spread, basically.
Yeah.
So that brings us here to kind of what we're looking for here. So we're going to look at a example of resting on your laurels. It's positive, but this is also one of the earliest examples of our phrase, although it is written in prose. This is from the Poems on Affairs of the State from the year 1640 to the year 1704. This was published in 1716. Our specific usage comes from a poem titled "The Prince's Welcome to London." The phrase uses a familiar word that means something different today. Umbrage today is usually reserved to mean offensive, but in the 1700s, the word often referred to shade, like that of a tree. It comes from the Latin word umbra, which is also the root of umbrella. So when you hear umbrage in our quote, think shade from a tree rather than offensive or resentful. Here we go. Quote, "Now cleared from sullen frowns, our realms are blessed, and in the umbrage of your laurels rest." End quote.
That's so catchy. We should still be saying it like that?
And in the umbrage of your laurels rest?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we don't say it like that because it is widely accepted to be a bad thing in
That's true.
In our society here.
Publish or perish.
That's right. Here's one more example. This is from a 1723 translation of a work called Memoirs of Jean-Francois Paul de Gonde, and this is Cardinal de Retz, and it was written by himself. So Cardinal de Retz died in 1679, so the work was completed by then, but the English terminology is from the 1723 translation by P. Duval. Quote, "The Duke d'Orleans and the Prince de Conde, the latter attached to the court by his covetous temper, thought themselves above being riled. The Duke was old enough to take his repose under the shadow of his laurels. Monsieur de Mours was but a child." End quote. I like that idea. I love the concept of being able to, you've done a lot of good things and now it's time to rest. It's time to relax. And a lot of this is talking about that concept of retirement, what we might call now as retirement, where you've worked your life and then you get to a point where it's like, now I'm going to kind of sit at home and play with my grandkids and do my daily stuff, but I don't have to work so hard at things anymore because I did my working, I did my great deeds, and now I get to enjoy the rest of my time. So this early version of the phrase with words like repose and shadow show it continuing to be a positive thing. The Duke was older, had achieved many things, and so he could relax or repose under the shadow of his works, and he'd earned it. Now, the thing is, from the mid 1600s and onwards, it's not exactly clear what shifted in the public mindset to go from a positive connotation to a negative one. But at some point in the 1700s, the phrase did shift to a point where it was no longer acceptable to rely on past contributions in society. So here's an example of the term being used in the negative. It's published in the 1798 work, Public Characters. And this is the opening line from a story by Charles James Fox. And as far as opening lines goes, it's a pretty good one. Quote, "All the great men of the present day are either the offspring of or immediately descended from new families. The ancient nobility repose under the laurels of their ancestors." End quote. He goes on to be rather harsh about the old nobility, how they don't strive for greatness, they do not desire to be learned, they do not take note of the needs of society, they just let those things happen and continue to live in the world built by their ancestors.
Right.
So if this was the sentiment, I could totally see why folks were like, no, it's not worth it. You can't just relax on your laurels, because it sounds like at this point there were many people who were not near the end of their careers or the end of their lives that were now just relaxing on their successes. Or in
Yeah.
this case, they're not even relaxing or reposing under the shade of their own tree. It's tree that their parents or their ancestors built, that they're relaxing under and not giving anything to society.
Yeah, I think I could see that, like, especially, I don't know if there's that focus on, like, it's not even their great works that
Mm-hmm.
that people are living off of. And yeah, there's always been some bitterness towards that throughout history, still is. First, maybe obvious reasons, I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, so I could see where that could then shift the phrase itself, like the word being kind of put into that, just pulled into that mix of like, oh, well, they did that years ago. What good is that now? Or their parents did that.
Right. Well, if we fast forward 100 years, we are still seeing the phrase as a negative. This example comes from Teddy Roosevelt in a speech to his troops just before the famous Rough Riders returned home following the armistice for the Spanish-American War. The speech is dated September 4th of 1898, and I pulled this quote from Appendix G of the 1911 work The Rough Riders, which was written by Theodore Roosevelt. Quote, "What we have done only calls us to renewed exertion in the future. I know you are not likely simply to rest on your laurels. Life is a constant struggle, and no man can afford to remain idle, to rely in the present upon the deeds of an ever-fading past." End quote. So in this case, Roosevelt has made a great case for how the concept of resting on one's laurels was viewed, at least by him, and he was a pretty famous guy in American culture.
Yeah, especially for like how to kind of live your life, like that, like lifestyle examples. He was
Mm-hmm.
pretty high up there.
Now, we saw that in mid-1800s and beyond, the phrase has mostly been used in the way we're currently using it, with a comment on someone who is or might be relying on their past experiences to get them ahead in the future. And so we're going to move to our more modern uses, but first, we do need to say thank you to our sponsors.
This episode is brought to you by our amazing patrons on Patreon, and it is 100% free to join the Bunny Trails community. So give our weekly discussions and poll questions a try. And if you love the content and want more of it, we have some paid tiers too if you have a few dollars to spare each month and want to support the show.
We have new things every weekday on the feeds. In addition to the conversation about what movies, shows, books, and podcasts everyone is enjoying, and our weekly poll questions, we also have early access to the week's podcast, all the links, books, songs, and other content mentioned in the week's episode, and our lightly edited behind-the-scenes video featuring all of the cut content, goofs, and bonus facts that didn't make it into the podcast feed.
We've also got original digital artwork every month made by me and direct access to talk with us. No nefarious social media algorithms getting in the way of what we see or don't see. Plus, you can get awesome name recognition like Pat Rowe and JGP do every episode. And our top spot is currently occupied by the amazing Mary Halsey Lopez. You can join the Bunny Trails community for free at Bunny Trails Pod on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod.
All right, to start our modern uses, I thought I'd point out an area where many of you may already be familiar with Laurus nobilis. If you have done any cooking in the United States, Canada, or the United Kingdom, you are likely familiar with the herb or herb that we call a bay leaf. While there are many types of bay leaf, the most common one you see in stores is the laurel leaf. I didn't realize that until I was researching this episode, but now I totally understand why it's described as an aromatic leaf. There's another cool fact for your brain to file away. If you have common bay leaves at your house, that's a laurel leaf. And if you want to weave them together into a pillow, then you can rest on your laurels.
Okay.
There you go. There
Good
you
plan. There are some people like who call them the perfect leaves because of the shape.
They are like very leaf shaped.
Right. But maybe we just think that that's what leaves should be shaped like because it's the, idealized leaf. I don't know.
Well, I mean, certainly it could be, I guess, for some, but I live in an area with lots of deciduous trees, and none of the leaves look like that.
None of them are shaped like that. But when you ask a kid to draw a leaf, most of them are going to draw this shape.
Oh, yeah,
just
no,
kind
I
of
could
like,
I could see that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's look at some examples of it being used today. And here's the usage of the phrase I found on the Sobriety for Women website. It encourages those in recovery process to understand that resting on your laurels can lead to relapse, but to also remember that sobriety is a marathon, not a sprint. They note that page 85 in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, quote, "It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Every day is a day when we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is the proper use of the will." End quote. So in this usage, rest on your laurels is definitely being used with a negative outcome. But, I guess the point is they recognize that when slip-ups happen, we can still continue to grow. We have to keep working at it day in and day out. We can't just rest on the past work we've done, at least in the case of recovery. Now, Rest on Your Laurels is a song by John Kingsley off the 2016 album About the Town. Kingsley is described on SoundCloud as a folk singer and songwriter. The song includes this line, quote, "Rest on your laurels, there'll be more fish to fry tomorrow," end quote. So we've been discussing the first line, but the second line means there's more work to do tomorrow, but you can leave those problems for tomorrow. So it'd be similar to saying we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So the song is encouraging the listener to rest on their laurels today, but to remember there is more work to be done tomorrow. And frankly, that's how I feel like the
That's
phrase
a
should
good
be used.
message,
Right?
yeah.
Now, I probably wouldn't couple it with there'll be more fish to fry tomorrow, but
Yeah, because it's usually like more of that.
because
like,
it's a
there's another problem or
weird
whatever.
idiomatic mix. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I definitely my thought is I think it's perfectly reasonable to be able to rest on your laurels at some point. You just can't do it forever. But I'm not the only one who thinks that. Don't Rest on Your Laurels, Repose on Them is a 2018 article on Medium posted by Lauren Dean. In it, she talks about earning her doctorate and the period afterwards. Quote, "1 year ago today, I defended my PhD thesis in sociology in the Kingdom of Sweden, a defense that later culminated in a graduation ceremony with hundreds of years old tradition of crowning the new doctors with laurel leaves, a tradition started in ancient Greece for great accomplishments, an honor. For the past year, I have reposed on my laurels. That is, I have achieved no greater success or even strived for one than the earning of my PhD. And I have felt guilty about that every second of the day for the past year. A moment that was for me such a great achievement, that I was so proud of, that was the apex of many years of work, ended up feeling like a great loss. What had I actually achieved if I did not keep achieving?" End quote. Now, she continues in the article to discuss the model of striving, achievement, honor, and then more striving, and how in the United States, her birth country, it isn't acceptable to rest on your laurels, and instead of being content with our successes, we're always pushed to continue to strive. She
Yeah.
notes every battle won requires a new battle cry, a new enemy, and a new territory to conquer, which begs the question, what is the point of success? And she closes with these words of wisdom, quote, "Achieving a goal is a reason to celebrate. It is a reason to be proud. And it is good enough if it is good enough for you. Striving for a goal and then striving to come up with a newer, bigger, better goal is tiring. But if there is no greater outcome to be achieved, there is no striving to achieve it. And the cycle is broken. Pleasure is reinstalled in the model for life. Our reality is changed. In that sense, I am not only reposing on my laurels, that is, my achievements, I am resting on a solid identity of who I was and who I am now. a subjective identity that doesn't measure you against me or me against my prior self, because those things are qualitatively incomparable. It is okay to achieve your goals. It feels good. And it is okay to stop trying to outdo yourself. That feels good too, once you can stop feeling so guilty about it. End quote.
I feel that so much because it's like I hear people say things like they're celebrating, and in the middle of their celebration, they're like, yeah, I know I'm not done yet, but, and it's like they should be able to just be happy about what they accomplished.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a time to rest on your laurels, before crossing some other bridges in the future. Resting on My Laurels is a 2023 song by Victoria Whitlock. The song is about the interplay of accomplishment, contentment, and motivation. Here's the opening verse. Quote, I'm resting on my laurels, though my laurels aren't enough. I'm feeding into my sorrows, though my sorrows aren't that tough. I am trying to make things happen, though the happening's pretty rough. I just want to have things easy, but my mind is filled with stuff. End quote.
Okay. And Victoria Whitlock, I don't know who that is. Those are good lyrics.
Yeah, I think you would enjoy the song. Many of you might. So just you can go to our Patreon page and click on the link in the show notes, or you can go to bunnytrailspod.com and click on the link from the show notes there. The Rest of the Laurels is a 2024 debut album of Janani K. Jha. Each song features a story from mythology, but they all come together as an album to tell a new story too. Here's a brief poem she includes with the album. Quote, here's the tale I've come to tell, of two options when it comes to hell. Simmer in the ashes, let the flames lick your thighs, or go through it and back and fall out the other side. End quote. So the Laurels have this mythological tie, while the album is about continuing to press forward without resting on past experiences, which makes the album title a really fun play on words with the popular phrase.
Yeah, that's
So,
awesome.
well done, Janani. I like it. Well done. So for me, I have never really liked the phrase, don't rest on your laurels, mostly because I'm not much of an absolute kind of guy. I like wiggle room. But now that I've learned the phrase was originally a positive one, I think I like it a lot better. I think it's perfectly acceptable for someone to have given much in life and then be able to relax, confident in a life well lived. And I know the phrase has taken on a more micro view these days, but I still agree with Dr. Dean in her Medium article. It is okay to rest on your laurels for a time. We should be able to bask in the successes as they happen. One can get too much of a good thing, though, so for the most part, I say repose under the shade of those laurels, my friend, and then you can cross some other bridges when you come to them later. That's about all the time we have for today. If you have any thoughts on the show or pop culture references we should have included, reach out to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/bunnytrailspod, or comment on our website, bunnytrailspod.com.
It's poll time. Recently, we asked our patrons, how do you usually start your day? Many of you work some exercise, mostly yoga, into your morning routine. Cheryl says, quote, yoga, meds, and then a bath and tea, end quote. Alan notes, quote, really depends on the day. Always breakfast first, but then yoga if there's time, end quote. And Mary adds, quote, lately, I lay in bed for a few minutes waking up, then I jump right in. I turn on NPR One and get ready for the day. However, I really prefer to get up to Native American flute music and yoga, end quote.
Well, Jan says, quote, tea and some sort of breakfast as I balance the checkbook and read the news. Might have a YouTube thunderstorm sounds video going in the background doing that. Then upstairs to the office to work, end quote. For me, I have a sign over the kitchen that reads, all happiness depends on a leisurely breakfast. And that is very true of myself. So my days start slowly, usually with coffee and quiet time. If I had a newspaper, I would almost certainly read it to start the day. But online news is awful, so I only read it once a week. I do usually check my budgeting app. I hadn't even thought about that until Jan said it. But I do usually first thing in the morning check my budgeting app to make sure that nothing unexpected has happened, because I've had too much fraud over the years not to keep an eye on it, right? But I do really wish that I was a workout in the morning kind of person. For me, I just, no matter how hard I try, I just am not a do any sort of physical, even meditative, relaxing like type of supposed activity. I just can't do that in the morning. So I've got to start with a cup of coffee or tea, whatever's possible, and then physical activity is going to have to happen like mid morning or later. So I can get up, do some relaxing, drink a cup of coffee or whatever, and then go do, whether it's a meditation session or it's, some sort of a workout or whatever. But yeah.
I am different than all of you. I don't. I like. It's like how do you start your day? And I was like, I don't really start my day. My day starts, and I am there, and so I have to go along with it.
You're floating in a river,
Yeah.
being pulled in whatever directions it decides
It's
to
like
go.
whatever. Sometimes I try to ignore that the day is starting, but it just keeps happening. So if I'm on holiday though, I'll start the day with like coffee or lounging around or something, or just like jumping up to do something fun. It kind of depends how I feel at the moment. But those like day to day, I'm just sort of like, yeah, whatever happens, happens. So if you want to take part in our silly polls, head over to the Patreon. We'd love to hear your take on our weekly poll questions. And it's free at patreon.com/bunnytrailspod. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week. Until then, remember,
Words belong to their users.